Hi, I'm MaryJo Finney, and I like testimonies that start out, I grew up in a Christian home. But I especially like what Pastor said a couple weeks ago when he said, growing up in a barn will not make you a cow, and growing up in a Christian family will not make you a Christian. Growing up on a farm south of Springfield, Ohio, left little time or energy to have any social life, but what we had revolved around the church. I was in church when the doors were open. Youth fellowship provided social involvement with other teens. Carry-in meals during the week provided additional social involvement. I never questioned what I was taught or not taught in the Presbyterian church, but I kept active in that environment until I attended Wittenberg University, a Lutheran college. I never got involved. I just went on some Sunday mornings, but I was determined not to be one of the kids when they go off to college, they do not darken the doors of a church again. So I went occasionally. Upon graduation from Wittenberg, I accepted a teaching position at the Joint Vocational School in Springfield. Rented an apartment in Springfield, visited several local churches, but I was a floater. I just kept visiting different churches. And after meeting a man from New York, we dated for several years, married, and then moved to New York. He was not a Christian, and even though we tried attending a Presbyterian church in New York, we neither one were saved. This marriage ended in divorce, but I stayed in New York where I found a job. However, here's where my life changed drastically, for the worse. Now I'm single, living in this big New York city, outside this big New York city, and I embraced all that the 1960s and 70s offered, caring about nothing or anybody but myself. It was make love, not war, the peace symbol, drugs, alcohol, bad language, and decent living, on and on and on. I did it all, and yet I felt this void. Something was missing. I was just unsatisfied. So I remained in this life for several years in New York until I returned to Ohio to take care of my mother 24/7 when she had her heart surgery. I moved into her home and realized I had to change my ways very quickly. So it was because of her prayers that I was able to start seeing what I had been doing was not at all what I wanted to do. I knew that she was praying for me that whole time that I was in New York, and that it was her prayers that kept me basically alive several times out of some serious situations. So I started to think about this prayer thing. Did it really work? Caring for my mother just meant that I had to clean up my lifestyle. So at the same time, my very close first cousin also lived in Cedarville. And as a Christian, she started asking me to attend her church with her. I came up with every excuse in the book, from not this Sunday, I have to straighten up my sock drawer, or no, it can't be that Sunday, I have to wash my hair. You can imagine the excuses I came up with. She was a very persistent, kind, gentle Christian who kept after me and kept asking me to go to the church with her. So I gave in and said, once, I'll go with you. The day that I went, I couldn't believe what I heard. The pastor stood in front of the church. Everyone had their Bibles open. He preached from the Bible. It was just something that I wasn't prepared for. Now, I have long forgotten what he preached on that Sunday, but I felt he was talking only to me and not to the other 1,000 people sitting in that church that day. I went back that night and I got the same good feeling. Something was starting to happen with my void. What's going on? What did this pastor know? My whole life seemed to be changing just by attending this church. I felt I was getting something, perhaps being fed, but anyhow this void was disappearing. So I started thinking about joining this church. And in so doing, I realized that they offered a class there called the Welcome Class for people interested in attending the church, joining the church. I signed up. I went in with 30 other people. They offer it 3 or 4 times a year. And on the first evening that we met, we were all asked to tell something about ourselves. I later learned this was called Give Your Testimony, but at that time I was new to it. So I told a little bit about my background, where I had been in New York and so on and so forth, and said that I thought I would go to heaven because of the good things I had done. I thought that was pretty good. Well, my testimony was weak, and I realized that afterwards. But the next Sunday during morning service, Pastor gave the call and said, with heads bowed and eyes closed, if anyone would like for me to pray for them today, please raise your hand. My hand went up so quickly, I wasn't even sure it was my hand. But then I thought, I'm in the balcony, he didn't see me, there are plenty of other people, I'm sure he didn't see me. So I let it go. That very afternoon, in about 2 o'clock, this pastor called me at my home and said, I saw your hand this morning and I would like to pray for you, but I also remember your testimony in the welcome class, and I think we need to talk. Could you be here at 2? 30 minutes from now? I'm not ready for this decision. How could I possibly go and sit down with him and talk? And so it was that afternoon that I prayed for forgiveness. It was a very long prayer, and asked Jesus into my heart. It was like night and day. I was in my 40s. This couldn't be happening to me. I wasn't the same person that was out there in New York. I felt difference. It was a difference for the better. But meanwhile, after my meeting with the pastor, there were other church members floating around that afternoon in the church doing what church members do on a Sunday afternoon in a church. And so he took me out and we greeted each and every one of them, and he introduced me as their new sister in Christ. This was real. It was really happening. That evening, Dr. Paul Dixon, president of Cedarville College, spoke at our church at Grace, and he also gave the call. And before I knew it, I was out of the pew and down in front with him and giving my public testimony for having been saved that afternoon. After that, several ladies met with me and prayed with me, and several weeks later, I was indeed baptized with my entire family, taking up an entire pew in Grace Baptist Church. The void was gone. I continued to attend Grace for several years, learning as much as I could about the Lord and learning that this prayer thing is real. I really am just a Christian baby. I continue to grow and love the Lord more and more each day. May this testimony reach someone today who has perhaps had a background similar to me, when they thought, I am so bad. The Lord doesn't want me. This is a terrible way to live a life. Well, He does want you. And I can say from my few years of being saved, what a life He can give you once you're saved.
I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
I'm MaryJo, and I am a Christian.
For a crown.
For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved.